set up right behind me is the simple lean-to shelter that I showed you how to make using nothing but a space blanket, some paracord, and some tent stakes. So we're going to take this simple lean-to shelter and we're going to make it a lot better at retaining heat. We're going to add a simple painter's drop cloth. This is a sheet of plastic that painters use to cover furniture and to cover the floor while they're painting. Just thin, clear plastic. So we're going to use this very cheap item from the hardware store, combine that and modify our lean-to shelter into something called a super shelter. This super shelter basically uses greenhouse effects. So it's going to trap heat from a fire. The heat from the fire is going to radiate through the clear plastic, bounce off the silver inside of our shelter, and stay right there and keep it nice and warm on a cold day. So let me show you how to do this with nothing more than painter's drop cloth and a little more extra cordage. All right, the first step in modifying our lean-to shelter to make a super shelter is to put our drop cloth on the top. So we're going to unroll this and put it over the top, ready to be tied down. All right, we want to make sure this plastic tarp leans over the front of the shelter with about a foot or two of the tarp still on the ground. We're going to use a big long piece of wood, a stick, to roll that up and make the front of our shelter. So leave about a foot to 2 feet laying on the ground in front of the shelter there. Next, we have to tie down the back parts. All right, so in order to tie down the back part of our painter's tarp to the existing lean-to shelter, we're going to use the same tent stakes that we've already used to put the shelter in the ground. So you need a way to tie off this back part here without tearing the fabric. So there's a simple way to do that. If you get a nice round smooth stone, you can actually put that stone behind the plastic and then hold that down with the simple taut line hitch that I showed you about how to make already. So in case you forgot how to make the taut line hitch, I'll show you again. Gonna take our rope, make a loop in the front side of the rope with the rope passing around the front of the string. So that's our working end. We're gonna take our working end, put that through the loop once and around, put that through the loop twice, pull it through. This time it's gonna go around the standing end and back down through that loop that we're making right there. So we just wanna pull this all nice and tight, of course. So there we go. Now we have a sliding taut line hitch. We can make this as big or as small as we need to. So we're going to tighten this like a noose right around that little pebble and hold down the back of our painter's drop cloth. Alright, so there we go. Just like that, we've tied down the back end without ripping our fabric. So we're going to go ahead and make another taut line hitch around the tent stake and tighten this up. Now that we have the back end of our painter's drop cloth staked down to our tent stakes, we need to roll up the front with a long piece of wood. So let me show you how to do that. So here you're looking for a long straight piece of wood, pretty heavy, probably about 7 feet long. Remember, our shelter is about 7 feet long on this side, so you want your stick to be a little less than 7 feet. 6.5 is great. So I'm gonna set this down on the ground. and use the weight to help us to pull our shelter, our drop cloth, fairly tight. Alright, so as you can see, we have some extra space right here. What we're going to do, now that we have this laid out and tight the way we want, we're going to move our stick back to the edge. We're actually going to roll this fabric right around our stick a couple times. There we go. Now we have the front of our shelter. It's not going to be drum tight, but you know, it's nice and slick right where we want it. So now what we have left to do is close up the sides. When closing up the sides of our shelter, it doesn't have to be airtight. We want a little bit of airflow in there so that we don't suffocate, so that some condensation from our body can actually evaporate out the side. So we're going to use the same trick of using a smooth little stone, and what we're going to do is actually going to take both sides. We're going to gather up all the extra material from the right and from the left. We're going to tug this material together and go down as low as we can where they still overlap. We're going to put the stone around the back side of both pieces and then secure it in place with another taut line hitch knot and secure it down. Alright, there we go. If we want to, we can even take the extra piece hanging down and stake this straight down to the ground as well to make it a little bit extra tight. Alright, once you get the sides all put together, basically the shelter's pretty much done at this point. It's time to start your fire. So let me take you on a little walk around the shelter so you can see it from all sides. Once it's up, you can make little adjustments here and there to make it nice and tight and make sure everything's good. So here we go. Alright. So we have that piece of wood in front, holding the plastic down all along the way. That's going to be our door in and out too. Basically, we're just going to lift that up and crawl underneath. We have the extra material from the painter's drop cloth pulled in around the sides. There's a little bit open at the top corner there, you can see, but we have the bottom staked out with the stake as well to hold everything nice and tight to the ground. Come around, here's the back of our shelter. Because we added our taut line hitch knot to those back corners, that's a really, really easy way to adjust to make sure the shelter is nice and tight. You can see this back one right here. It's a little bit of a gap right there, so I'm actually going to go ahead and tighten that up just to make sure everything's good. To tighten this up, all we need to do, use our sliding knot, like that, and that's going to pull everything nice and tight the way we want it. Alright, so as you can see, I have a nice little cozy fire going to start to heat this shelter up. Depending on how cold it is, the colder it is, the longer and bigger you want your fire. If it's very, very cold out, you're going to make a fire that's 6-7 feet long, just the same length as this shelter, because you want to be as warm as you possibly can. But for demonstration purposes, we have a nice little cozy 3-foot long fire going. This should be plenty enough to heat up our shelter here. So I'm going to let that go for a tiny bit and then crawl inside to see what the difference is. Alright, our fire's been going for just a few minutes, so let's get in and see what it is. If you can see, our temperature out today in New York City, you see that? Ah, there we go. A chilly 39 degrees, hasn't broken 40 yet today, so it's actually fairly cool out today. So let's get inside and see how we're doing inside. Alright, so if this was going to be a shelter to last us the whole entire night, we would have a very, very big pile of firewood far enough away from our fire so that our firewood piles not catch. We want a big, big, big pile of firewood so that when we get in our shelter, we can just keep feeding the fire from inside the shelter. To get in our shelter, we're going to just lift up our piece of wood here and crawl inside. So from here, we can just occasionally grab some firewood and lift up our piece of wood and put it on, being sure to keep it away from our shelter. So I'm not exaggerating at all when I say it feels like it's about 80, 85 degrees in here. It's really, really warm. All right, so here I am inside the Survival Super Shelter. You can actually look and see the fire going through the plastic right outside there. So I've been in here for, I'd say, less than 5 minutes, I think. Maybe 10 minutes now, not even. And I have a thermometer in here. So as of right now, the thermometer is reading about 27, 28 degrees Celsius. Right down at the bottom of the screen, I'll put the Fahrenheit calculation for you. Off the top of my head, I don't know it, but yeah, we're currently only been in the shelter for less than 10 minutes. We're up to about 28 degrees Celsius, and this is only with a small little 3-foot long small fire. So this is an incredibly efficient shelter. With 40 degrees outside, I think we just about doubled that. I think we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 something degrees or getting close to it. So this is an amazing, amazing shelter to build in cold weather. What's going on? The heat from my fire is coming through the plastic sheet right here. The radiated heat is coming. It's bouncing off the silver reflective part of the inside of our blanket here, and it's basically creating a greenhouse effect to keep me actually too darn warm with my sweater on. It's actually too warm for comfort in here. So absolutely amazing, incredibly efficient winter survival shelter, super shelter. There you go. All right, there you have it. That is the super shelter. When I got out of the shelter, the thermometer I had was reading 30 degrees Celsius, and it didn't seem like it was slowing down. It seemed like it kept inching up. So at 30 degrees Celsius, I got too hot. I was sweating in my sweater. I had to get out of there. But either way, now hopefully you can see what a great shelter this is for winter survival. And it doesn't cost very much to pack or make. You keep that space blanket, which is about $20, less than a pound weight. That painter's drop cloth from the hardware store usually costs about $3 to $4. And that is, I don't know, maybe a quarter of a pound that you carry in your bag. So for a little bit of weight and a little bit of money, you can have a shelter that's going to keep you warm in just about any condition you can think of.